Hey everyone, quick little announcement here from Fishing the DMV. Our Weekend Warrior package on Patreon is nearly full. There are only 44 spots that are still available. Once these spots are gone, they're gone, and the Weekend Warrior tier will be closed to the general public. All members will be locked in indefinitely at a fantastic price point, and they will get all the benefits that they have today, plus any new benefits and discounts that will be added in the future. All Weekend Warriors will receive 5% off their orders to Jake's Bait and Tackle, 10% off their orders to Tiger Crankbaits, 10% off their orders to Catoctin Creek Rod. They'll also gain access to our private Facebook group community, loads of members-only content. And in 2025, there are going to be tournaments that will be given a massive discount specifically to our Weekend Warrior members. Plus, if you sign up for the year right now, you will get 8% off your already fantastically discounted rate to join the Weekend Warrior program. Link in the episode description. Thank you. You're listening to Fishing the DMV with your host, Thomas Ahrens. Fishing the DMV is brought to you by Jake's Bait and Tackle, located in Winchester, Virginia.
If that doesn't get you jacked up, I don't know what will.
Welcome to this last minute live. We got some fun things to talk about tonight. It has been a really long time since we've had one of these powwows just breaking down some nerdy stuff, which is data, scientific data. And there's a heck of an article that really is starting to catch fire, which is this, what Alabama would like to do when it comes to regulations and their thoughts on a study that they did for the Coosa chain of lakes, again in Alabama for people that do not know. I was going to do this as a Monday night, but I have a really cool guest booked for Monday night live. I know, hail to the Redskins, terrible timing here, but this is just going to be quick to get it out there. This episode will drop Monday morning as a podcast episode. I just wanted to get this out there, have a little interaction with you all. It was either tonight or Friday night, and I knew the Redskins game was going to be happening here soon, so I just wanted to get this thing out of the way. So anyway, we're going to be going through this article, breaking it down, what they're actually talking about, because there's a lot of little snippets and clips. I posted one specifically from the article, and after I posted that on Instagram, I was like, you know what? Why don't we just educate people? Let's just walk through the article together. This will be a little boring, but hopefully there will be a little bit more clarity of what the heck they're talking about. And we can have some good dialogue. I put the call-in number right there as well. So without further, hey, B-Cal, the game starts at 8 o'clock, doesn't it? The Redskins game? It starts at 8? I think it does. I thought it was 8. It's not 6. So anyway. And then we'll talk about my points and my thoughts. And I thought as we go through this article together, I can just kind of like give you my thoughts on the whole thing. So without further ado, let me pull this thing up here. It starts at 8. Yeah, okay. Game starts at 8. Perfect. All right. Why is it not sharing? I know how I did all this prep for this document, but then my screen won't share. Oh. I am a silly boy. I'm a silly boy. There we go. All right, here we go. Alrighty, guys. This might be a little bit boring for some of you, but I think this will be interesting, and I'm just going to be walking this through with everyone. So anyway, these are the recommendations from the black bass regulation changes on the Coosa River Reservoirs. The introduction. And this is the exact document. I just pulled this from the internet. This is the exact document that they were using, their proposal on what we could do to help out some of the lakes on the Coosa chain. So, in response to present complaints from anglers about the declining quality of black bass fisheries on the Coosa River Reservoirs, the ADCNR funded a 3-year research project through Auburn University to examine the impact of bass tournaments and mortality of largemouth bass and Alabama bass on Neely Henry Reservoir near Goldston, Alabama. Neely Henry Reservoir was chosen due to several factors that made it suitable for the project. Neely Henry has high tournament activity, good amenities and local lodging, boat ramps that provide access to most of the reservoirs for tracking fish, as well as fisheries characteristics that made it suitable for research projects. The total cost of this project was almost $1 million. My God, for 3 years. Okay. Let's break that down real quick. Let's go 8, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, divided by 3 years. So that's about $278,000 per year. Okay, so we'll break down the math that way. Anyway, with that said, this project is completed and we have reviewed the data through the results. So I really wish they would elaborate even more so of why they chose Neely Henry. First off, right off the bat, again, they say Neely Henry Reservoir was chosen due to several factors. So the several factors were the high tournament activity, good amenities, lodging. Okay, that's it. And then it kind of gets into the boat ramp that provided access. Well, all those lakes have boat ramps. Could you get a little bit more into it? But that's just kind of one of my many thoughts of this thing. All right, let's get into the methods here. And this is actually really small, guys. It's only 4 pages, and I will speak fast. Methods. Our population modeling used variables obtained from portions of the Auburn University study and from our long-term standardized sampling database. All variables are scientific estimates based upon the results of these studies. Table 1 shows the parameters used to perform the simulation modeling. The Neely Henry study estimated very high annual capture rates for largemouth bass, 80%, and Alabama bass at 120%. So maybe they have an Alabama bass problem, but again, that's their generic range, so, duh. However, only 2% of the captured largemouth bass and 4% of the captured Alabama bass were harvested by recreational anglers, okay? 40% of the total captured events occurred during tournament competition. It was estimated that a total of 45% of bass weighed in during tournaments suffered pre and or post-release mortality. Interesting. Now, key word here, estimated. So it's not 100% certain. We estimate that this was a thing. Just keep that in mind there. So we estimate that the totality of it was 45% of bass weighed in during the tournament suffered pre or post-release mortality. This is likely a conservative estimate. Interesting. As a result has shown that total tournament mortality can range, as research has shown that total mortality range can range from 50 to 80% during hot weather, figure 1, and we're gonna bounce to that one right here. And let's go to, here we go. Here's figure 1. And this predicts the percent total mortality of tournaments caught, largemouth bass caught in Alabama. And then this is slide number 1 here. And we'll show the slides off a little bit later. I just really want to kind of get into the nitty gritty of this article for now. It was estimated that the total of the 45% of the bass weighed in during the tournaments. I'm going to get my place there. Okay, cool. As high school and collegiate tournaments have increased, the number of summertime tournaments have also increased. Interesting. I feel like that's separate from the rest of this. That feels like it's, okay, so yeah, it's weird because the way this is structured, that makes sense. And then this feels like a tagged on, which that also threw me. I was like, why is this connected to this paragraph? This should be separate as a problem. Like, okay, so we're seeing more increase here. I don't know. I don't like how that's structured. Let's go back to the next thing. Results and discussion. On Neely Henry, captured rates were very high for both species. For comparison, a study at Lake Gunnersville estimated annual capture rates of largemouth bass at about 50%. Both reservoirs receive heavy tournament pressure that negatively impact the size structure of their bass populations. However, Neely Henry is 6 times smaller and more riverine and does not have expansive overbank areas that offer good black bass habitat. Should we also mention that Lake Gunnersville, even though the Homeowners Association there is doing its best to destroy every single piece of vegetation in that place? Is Lake Gunnersville bigger? Is it more fertile? I think that's possibly true, 100%. But let's also, they won't mention it right now, but there's SAV in Gunnersville. There is no SAV in Neely Henry. Not to the amount it's at Lake Gunnersville. Okay. But I digress. Okay. Because the Coosa River Reservoir is smaller and more vulnerable to the effects of tournament mortality, they can only withstand a fraction of the tournament pressure that larger reservoirs receive. So what this is implying is the size and the habitat is not good enough for the amount of pressure it receives. That is an interesting evaluation. To put things in perspective, Neely Henry, Logan Martin, Lay, Michael, and Jordan reservoirs combined total less than 75% of the total surface acreage of Lake Gunnersville. The way this is written, I almost feel like it's written by a student. It was not written by a tenured professor. I don't know why. It just, there's something about this article that's thrown to me about how it's structured for scientific portions. So it's trying to make the premise, this is a weird throwaway line that's really bugging me about that, but it's trying to make the premise that the size is a problem. Okay, the lake is too small. But there are a ton of small lakes that put out massive bags. Lake Anna is a great example of that. Now, again, I'm just trying to pick this thing through, and then we can talk about it as a whole. I also have a phone number up there too. I just put it in chat. Let me throw my phone number back up there. There you go. Call a number if you want to call in. We can talk about this some more. But anyway, let's continue. To put things into perspective, Neely Henry, Logan Martin, Lay, Michael, and Jordan reservoirs combined total less than 75% of the total surface acreage of Lake Guntersville. So this is an issue when it comes to mortality rates, right? Tournament anglers target the largest fish they can catch in an effort to have the heaviest weight and win the largest prizes. Some of these sentences do feel like they were written by an alien talking about what we're doing. It's interesting. Figure 2 shows how the size of bass weighed in during Neely Henry tournaments compared to the population at large. The large fish targeted by tournament anglers presents a relatively small portion of the total population. So high mortality rates on this segment of the population can quickly reduce the abundance of large fish. Okay, and then we can go to that slide real quick and we can show you that one. All right, here we go. This is the temperature one. This is very okay. Frequency of black bass tournaments versus the standardized sampling at Neely Henry. So there's a lot of tournaments on the lake. That's what this thing is trying to show you. Okay, and these are the percentiles. Let's get back up right here. All right, cool. The large fish targeted by the tournament anglers represents a relatively small portion of the total population, so high mortality on this segment of population can quickly reduce the abundance of larger fish. As an example, the relative abundance of 19-inch and 20-inch bass caught by Neely Henry tournament anglers was almost 4 times greater than their relative abundance in the population. Interesting way that is worded there. So Neely Henry tournament angler was almost 4 times greater than their relative abundance in the lake. So they're really good at catching big fish. No shit. I know, and we got Chris in the chat here. Chris is like, it definitely sounds like it was particularly written by AI. Yeah, like, so I've read a ton of scientific journals, mostly to myself, not out loud, for it makes me sound really, really stupid. And there's just things about it that just seem off as like it needed to be like re-edited one more time, or it was written by AI. Again, would I be surprised that maybe it was a student that helped out and they used Grammarly to help them potentially, but it's a little bit weird with that whole thing. And then, you know what? I just realized that my call number is not up. I apologize for that. Let me get that up there for you. Boom. All right, yeah. But yeah, weird stuff. Anyway, let's get back to the article. Then call-in number is 667-307-8583. Let's get back to it here. Anyway, my apologies, guys. And I'm going to go back a sentence ahead of time when I bounce back and forth just to make sure everyone can catch up here. Females of both species were disproportionately selected by tournament anglers because they are heavier than males of all sizes. Like that's... I don't think they care necessarily. Like that's such a weird thing that I mean, I guess from a scientific perspective, if you're talking just scientists talking to scientists, a biologist talking to biologists, this makes complete sense. Like, of course, females are going to be specifically more targeted. They're the bigger ones. Okay, that makes sense. Again, I wouldn't have structured it that way, but anyway, I digress. And because the maximum size of males is generally limited to 18 inches, 3 pounds. Okay, we get that. Therefore, to accumulate the heaviest weight possible, competitors weigh in 50% more females than males. Okay, yep, that makes all sense. Interested how that's worded, but that makes sense. This disparity was the greatest among bass older than age 6. We are getting a lesson about anglers catching the biggest fish in the lake. This is the no shit segment, where nearly 70% of all bass weighed in during tournaments were females. This resulted in female bass suffering a higher rates of tournament mortality. Okay, fair enough. Tournament anglers were also unknowingly selected for faster growing fish, which subject them to higher rates of mortality than slow growing fish. Figure 3 helps to illustrate this by comparing the mean length at age or of electrofishing versus tournament caught bass. This difference is evident at the younger age, but disappears at the older age because most of the faster growing fish have been eliminated from the population. Interesting to word it like that. Have been eliminated. So the faster growing fish get killed because they get caught. Interesting. Genes for faster growth are still present in the population and being passed on to their protege, but fish that possess them are suffering high rates of tournament mortality before realizing their full growth potential. Finally, it is estimated approximately, and that's what, let's get to the slide here just to show you guys through this thing here. There we go. This is slide 2. This is slide 3. And this is Alabama bass. So what they're talking about here with these slides is basically a fish that's, let's say, has F1 genes, that does steroids, and it gets to a 3-pound class in 1 year to 2 years. That fish will be 3 to 4 pounds quicker. Therefore, that fish will be targeted by a professional bass fisherman and put in the live well and taken for a boat ride. Okay, that's what they're saying here. Versus if it takes them 10 to 15 years, it would take longer, but again, it would be staggered, because whether it's 6 pounds, I guess it's kind of relative, because I see where they're coming from. I guess my brain works it out that regardless if it's fast or slow growing, if it's a 6-pounder you catch, it's a 6-pounder. If you've been to the Shenandoah River, guess what? That fish is probably 10, 15 years old as a smallmouth in the Shenandoah or the Potomac, Susquehanna. It's still going for the boat ride if it's 6 pounds, regardless of age. But they're splitting it up, like the ones with the faster genes are the ones getting the boat ride. Therefore, they're dying because they're going for a boat ride. Okay, cool. Cool. So I think we're all on the same page here. Scroll all the way back up here. I really should have done is like copied this and taken the slides out. That would have been actually a good idea. But anyway, I digress. Finally, it is estimated that approximately 70% of the total tournament-related mortality is being caused by competitors who do not have enough weight to earn any prize. This here, I want to come back to. I find this interesting. Why that's worded there. That was a big one I highlighted in my other one. Anyway, I digress. Let's get back to it here. Okay. Tournament anglers were also unknowingly selecting for faster growing fish, which subjected them to a higher rates of mortality than slow growing fish. Figure 3 helps illustrate this by comparing mean length at age of electro fish versus tournament caught. This difference is evident at the younger age, but disappears at the older age because most of the faster growing fish have been eliminated from the population by age 6. So, what is interesting about this too is they are comparing professional anglers and they're comparing that to electrofishing. I did an episode with John Odenkirk two weeks ago, and it was his sampling of the tidal Potomac River from the Virginia side, and that episode is going to release next spring when the Potomac River heats up, and it shows you like the best creeks where they caught them electrofishing. And he talked about in the episode, when you're electrofishing, it's not wizardry, like where you just drop the electrical net anywhere and the fish just pop up. That's not how it works. And if you're in a deep, clear lake, that will give you different results than if you are in a really shallow back pocket of a river. So example is electrofishing the Shenandoah is way easier, where it's 3 feet deep across the thing, versus if you're going to, Lake Anna or someplace like that where there's deep water and this fish can hide. So when are you doing the electrical survey? Are you doing the electrical survey in the summertime? Well, of course, the catch rates for tournament anglers are going to be better. They have forward-facing center. They're going offshore. Of course, they're going to catch more. So I think that's interesting that they're comparing it there. And then what tournaments are you comparing it to? That wasn't talked about a lot in the study, which is it you're comparing catch rates for a spring tournament for electrofishing in the spring? Are you comparing it against summertime catch weights? I just little things like that would be interesting. Not necessarily like saying right or wrong, but I would like to have known that too. Genes for faster growing are both still present in the population and being passed on to their protege, but fish that possess them are suffering high rates of tournament mortality before realizing their full growth potential. Finally, it is estimated that approximately 70% of the total tournament-related mortality is being caused by competitors who do not even have enough weight to earn a prize. That is such a weird little, I when I read this the first time, that was thrown in there almost like a jab. It was so weird. And it's like, and most of these bitches don't even win. It's like, damn, this is a scientific journal? and you're just throwing shade at people that suck at fishing. That's such a weird freaking line to have right in there. The 70% of the total tournament-related mortality is being caused by people who can't even catch them good and win a prize. In summary, Neely Henry tournament anglers are selecting for large, fast-growing females, which subject these three groups to the highest rate of tournament mortality. High capture rates are a function of small reservoir size, which compounds, high factor rate, It also means like you can have a high capture rate on a bigger impoundment too. It's not just necessarily small impoundments. It just has to do with the acreage of quality water. So like Gunnersville is a great example. They used it in the article. There's a lot of acreage that's not dead water when that lake is on. Lake Fork, Toledo Bend, Potomac River. I would argue that Potomac River is a great example. Like there's so much fishy water around there. So there's just different examples of that. Harvest rates are very low, measuring, I'll get back to this. Sorry about that. High capture rates are a function of small reservoir size, which compounds the effect of tournament mortality. Harvest rates are very low, meaning harvest rates, and this is important here, harvest rates are very low, meaning tournaments are causing the majority of the angling related mortality. Therefore, reducing tournament mortality is the best way to improve bass size structure. All right, interesting conclusion to that. Okay. Managing implications. Bass fishing has evolved over the past 30 years. Traditional length and bag limits were designed to manage harvest. These management strategies are ineffective on reservoirs with harvest rates near zero. The effectiveness of traditional length and bag limits has essentially been neutralized by catch and release ethics. Okay. So yeah, and we got Paul Blatter's bass fishing. I feel like some of these biologists got their information. Yeah. It's just like, again, it's just for a scientific journal to throw shade like this in the middle of it. It's like, it's estimated approximately 70% of tournament anglers really suck at fishing. They don't even win a prize for all the fish they kill. I don't know. It's such a weird. I would have docked the student for writing this paper. Like, dude, what the hell is this in here for? Like, you get a B. Anyway. These management strategies are ineffective. Now, okay, before I get to the next part, I really want to break this part down here. Bass fishing has evolved over the past 30 years. I would suggest that it's evolved way past that, even farther. Let's see. In 1960, catch and kill was the predominant way that you fished. That was how Forrest Wood, the guy that did Ranger Boats, you might know him, the first ever tournament was catch and kill. In 1972, catch and release debuted at the Florida Invitational. 1973, air raiders got into boats. I know I actually did some homework here, guys, believe it or not. So yeah, the sport has evolved a lot, and the idea of getting catch and release as an ethic to be so naturalized is a huge improvement. And by the way, all states, and I know this from Virginia and Maryland, when they do their sizing for striped bass, for crappie, for everything, they have it calculated out because they know they have it calculated like this. Hear me out. Every single person has a fishing license in Virginia. If all of them went out there today and took their limit of crappie, they wouldn't affect the fishery. That's how they usually stagger those creel sizes. So if it's a 10 crappie limit, they're assuming that if every single person that wanted to go crappie fishing went crappie fishing, it wouldn't wipe out the crappie population. So that's how a limit size works. And that's important because remember, a limit size means you get to kill them and eat them. Okay, so hear me out here. So bass fishing has evolved the past 30 years. Traditional length and bag limits were designed to manage the harvest. Okay, so we designed it to where you're not going to destroy the bass or crappie fishing with the limits that we put into place. Cool. These management strategies are ineffective, though, on reservoirs with near zero rates. Wouldn't that mean they were effective? So what you're saying is the traditional length and bag limits were designed to protect the species from over-harvesting. But these strategies are ineffective now because catch, weigh, and release worked, and we're not over-harvesting. That's how I've read this part here. Now we go back to this part here. However, contrary to what many tournament anglers believe, released tournament fish have high mortality rates, particularly during warm weather. Okay. Numerous studies I love this because if you're doing a scientific journal, you actually need to have a works cited document for everything that you do so you can turn that back. So what they should have done here is had a works cited page or a note somewhere that says the article that they're quoting. But we're not going to quote it. And there are, by the way, I am not saying that there aren't studies done on weather and fish mortality. Not at all. There are, and there's some really good ones. There's one that I'm going to go over with Maryland here at the very end of this because I had a Black Bass Advisory Board meeting for Maryland. So we'll go over that. But there's no works cited page for this document, which is just another red flag to me. Including our Neely Henry study, have documented that catch and release is most effective when done at time of catch. Okay, so they spent close to $1 million to determine that fish live longer when you catch it and put it back right away. Okay. This is how a squirrel gets euthanized, guys. This is how a squirrel gets euthanized in New York. The benefit of catch and release catch and release. The benefits of catch and release are neutralized by hours spent in live wells and the subsequent live weigh-in process that is associated with typical bass tournaments. In theory, a very high minimum I want everyone to watch this word. We will be quizzed on this and people will get Chick-fil-A gift cards at the end of this thing. In theory, a very high minimal length limit would help to address overall mortality, but would severely penalize recreational anglers who are far more numerous and are responsible for a much smaller proportion of the total mortality than tournament anglers. Therefore, a restrictive tournament only, again, this is only for tournament anglers, tournament only slot limit would yield better results in significantly improving size structure, particularly for Alabama bass. Okay, let's break this down. Putting a fish in a live well decreases its survival rate. That's no shit. We all agree there. Cool. I understand that. You put it in there and there's a statistical thing there. If everyone put one fish in their live well, statistically, there's going to be a mortality rate. Got that. This here is what's interesting. Why? If you went up to your wife or your significant other and you're like, hey, babe, in theory, I love you. We should do this thing. Is that the best selling perch there? Is that how you're going to really sell that crap? In theory, a high minimum length limit would help address it. You're not even selling me so far on this that you even agree with your own argument in the document you wrote about length limits. And again, I'm going to play both sides of this because I want to have a fun discussion. There have been lakes, Dale Hollow is a great one with smallmouth. They put those slot limits in place. It really helped. I mean, forgot like Lake Fork. It has those different slot limits, but that's one little tip of the iceberg is just the slot limit. How's the habitat? Do you have SAV? Do you have standing timber? How is the fishing pressure? How much bait and food do you have there? How's the fish genetics in the lake? Do you have Alabama bass in there and largemouth? You see, like there's so much stuff in there to help. And it's not just one thing. It's not like just slot limit. It's so many things. It's a very complex thing. So but again, with all that said, there are some times where that would help. It has been proven that it actually helps. Let's go with a couple of comments here. So that 100,000 Phoenix or Skeeter won't keep my fish alive. Yeah, no kidding. And again, the Maryland, the reason I'm showing you this is the Alabama. I'm going to show you one that the state of Maryland did to give them some props. It's way better, way better. So the 370 studies that say the biologist fish have the highest mortality don't mean anything. No, I'm not. Yeah. So I'm not saying that the studies are wrong at all. I'm saying, why didn't he cite any of them? If that makes sense. That's why I don't understand. Like, he didn't cite any articles to back up his hypothesis, because this is supposed to be a scientific paper to an extent. And it's just take my word for it, bro. And it's really weird to me. There are a lot of studies that the biggest fish will have the highest mortality rate. That's fine. But he's just basing it on assumption, which is weird. That's why, like, in theory here, that's why that word, it's like, that's such a weird to say that. Like, you should be like, based on these two, case studies that have proven the length limit will work. This is why we're going to implement it here. And then I'm talking about him saying keeping bigger fish will help address mortality. Yeah, okay. Yeah. That's again, dude, this shit was written by a 5-year-old. It doesn't make any sense. A very high minimum length limit would help address the overall mortality, but it would severely penalize recreational anglers. And it gets to the point there. If you create a bigger length limit, that means you're going to keep the bigger fish. And it's the same thing. It's like that weird slot that like Lake Fork has. But anyway, let's digress here. Let's scroll all the way down here, okay? Hey guys, we only have 1 page left and this thing's done. For size structure to improve, tournament mortality must be reduced. Okay. So through this whole article, we have at this point, we're coming to what they think should be done. So he has set up his case for why tournament is the problem, the reason these lakes are having issues, the right reason they identified the Coosa chain of lakes. All that has been identified, and here's the payoff of what they think we should do. There are a number of ways this could be accomplished. Number 1, limit tournament size and or frequency. Okay, conversation could be had there. Number 2, prohibiting tournaments during times when water temperature is above 70 degrees, approximately May through September. Okay, so in general, real talk with you guys. I'm a libertarian. Generally speaking, I just don't, and I know I'm on the government board, Tom, what the hell are you talking about? I don't like weird laws like that. I don't. I prefer, it's like, hey, listen, if it's too hot out there, the tournament director should be able to be like, just dial it back. But you saw in Pennsylvania what they did, where it's like, hey, listen, to protect the spawn, because we care about the fish, we don't want you fishing from April until like May or June. Are you okay with that? And we're like, yeah, sure, that's fine. That's no problem. That's no problem. And then they're like, hey, listen, the water's too hot. So now what we want is from May to September, we don't want you to have any tournaments. And now half the year, you're not allowed to chase a damn fish. You just lost your right to fish completely. And that's how they quickly take all that stuff away from you versus being like, hey, let's use common sense. It's 180 degrees. Probably shouldn't have a tournament this day. You know, selectively choosing it would be smarter. But again, because like that one there, just that terrifies me. Because once you slap April to September, that's, I don't know, that's just weird. And then I'll get into the other. I don't want to get ahead of myself here. So number 2 was just no more tournaments from May to September at all. Mandating a catch, weigh, and release tournament format. Number 3. This was on the Instagram post. Boy, there's a lot of people that hate Boyd Duckett right now that are having an aneurysm. Number 4, restrict length limits. Now, I love this one. Number 3, stop spraying grass. I 100% agree with that. Seems very contradictory. Yes, this whole thing is just bananas. And by the way, I want you guys to think about this, critical thinking skills here. From approximately May to September, what do they want to do? Prohibit fishing tournaments. Here it says mandate catch, weigh, release. Here it said nothing about weigh-in tournaments. Why do you think they did that? Now ask yourself, is it just a spelling error? This guy clearly sucks at writing a paper. Or he ran this thing through ChatGPT. Why didn't he specifically say prohibiting weigh-in tournaments during this time? Because if you keep a law extremely wishy-washy, that means you can interpret it any way you can. And that way, if 6 or 7 Fed agents want to raid your house and kill your pet squirrel and raccoon, they can do that because you make sure the law is a little vague. And that way you can get in there and do whatever you want. If you keep this wording here and you agree with this, in theory, in a court of law, you can say it doesn't state catch, weigh, release, or weigh-in. So they can ban either one. You got it. Just, again, I know it's kind of tinfoil hat, but if somebody in Alabama signed this, said like, yes, we agree with this law right here, number 2, we should do number 2 here. And this was written just the way it is and sent out there, it would ban all tournaments, period. Because it doesn't specifically state one way or the other. Therefore, it's up to the interpretation of whoever's in power. And that's scary there, dude. That is. And so I would really, really got to be, I would just be careful with this. And again, I get it. Like, I come from a family that likes to like lawyer shit and all that. And you can easily get busted for that, because especially when right here, then you say mandate catch, weigh, release formats. So I don't know. Anyway, that's just me there. Restrict length limits. And that's what we've been talking about here. The first two options are less desirable because their potential economic impacts to local communities. Again, when you say the first two have an economic impact, that kind of makes me feel like you're lumping all tournaments into number two. The second two options would reduce mortality within the current tournament framework without regulating the options. So basically, they think option 3 and 4 are the best, mandating a catch, weigh, release tournament format and restrict the length limits. These two options would reduce mortality within the current tournament framework without regulating blah, 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 blah. All right. States like North Carolina, West Virginia have enacted regulations that limit the size of tournaments based upon the capacity of the access areas where tournaments are being held. Other states have developed tournament permitting protocols. Florida, Arkansas, Oklahoma, New York, South Carolina, and Maryland. Maryland has the same thing. You have to get a permit if you're gonna have a tournament, so we know who you are, that seems like a smart idea, honestly. If I would have to pick one of the things, just limit the permits you give out. And then here's an idea. This is a really interesting one. Enforce the damn law. When I was on the board about raising the price of a freshwater fishing license in Maryland, the number one question I had is like, well, if someone doesn't pay it, what happens? And it's like, well, we might be able to enforce it. We might not be able to. So it's like, why would you create a law that you really can't enforce? And that's the fishing license thing is a whole other Pandora's box we can go down. But let's say we do a thing. How can you enforce it? And this not just with this, but just with anything in government. Like, don't create a law that you really can't enforce. I'm sorry. I'm going to go back to this article here. So trophy-sized Alabama bass is something the Coosa River is known for nationwide. Because of unregulated tournament mortality, our trophy Alabama bass fishery no longer exists. Anglers have transplanted Alabama bass into drainages outside their native range, trying to create what we once had in our Coosa River reservoirs. Unfortunately, their efforts have failed, and Alabama bass have naturally hybridized with smallmouth bass, shoaly bass, red-eye bass, which is destroying many well-known fisheries throughout the Southeast. This is giving the Alabama bass a bad reputation. Yeah, it should have a bad reputation because it's destroyed a lot of fisheries. Now, granted, you could be like, so, and I'll tease out, this is really talking about Alabama bass too, which is the spotted bass, Alabama bass. I know it's just kind of like yin yang, whatever with that, with wording there, and it being moved out there. We're going to get back to that about the Alabama bass. Restoring our trophy Alabama bass fisheries will make the Coosa River destination fishery again, blah, blah, blah. Since recreational harvest is responsible for a negligible amount of the total annual mortality regulations, that change recreational anglers' behavior would not result in noticeable improvements in the quality of these fisheries. It is our hope that tournament-only regulations will encourage more tournament organizations to voluntarily adopt the catch, weigh, release format being used by who's that there? Major League Fishing for its pro tournament events. This model is also being used almost exclusively by kayak tournament trails and other conservation-minded bass clubs. Catch, weigh, release would essentially eliminate tournament mortality for all ages and size of black bass and result in the greatest possible improvement in the quality of these fisheries. Most tournament trails encourage the weigh of non-competitive bags of fish in order to award points. This is such a weird segue this does here. But anyway, we'll get back to that, believe it. Most tournament trails encourage the weighing of non-competitive bags of fish in order to award points to anglers/teams to qualify them for a more exclusive, larger payout tournament that will probably be held in Alabama. Did boy pay their salary? I was waiting for someone to say that. I was waiting for someone to say that. Yeah, I just dude, come on. Before you wrote this, did you know how much you'd be trolling these people? Oh, goodness. Obviously, these practices Okay, I want to read this again because I thought this was funny. Okay. Most tournament trails encourage the weighing of non-competitive bags of fish in order to award points to anglers and teams to qualify them for more exclusive, luxurious, amazing large payout tournaments at the end of the year that will probably be held in Alabama. Obviously, this practice is inflating the mortality by encouraging all anglers and teams to weigh fish even when they do not even have a hope in hell because they are little boys that suck at fishing to earn a prize. Jesus, this person's throwing shade everywhere. My God. Most tournament trails encourage those non-competitive douchebags that cannot really catch them to weigh in their fish so we can laugh at them at the end of the year. Obviously, this is inflating mortality rates because these people aren't even catching decent bags. So why even weigh them? Again, so I'm being a little tongue-in-cheek here. Do they have a point? Yes. It's just, I don't know. I found it really funny, and I wish they went hard in the paint with it. Just to, yeah, some of these people that can't catch fish, they still weigh in these little bags. Why would you do that? Like, I don't know. I thought it'd be more fun if they really went hard in the paint. Applying the same regulation changes to all 6 Coosa reservoirs will ensure that angling will be improved for all bass anglers who fish Coosa River reservoirs, and that no local municipality will be disproportionately affected by the loss of tournament participation. Think about that for a minute. Let me read that again. I'll go through your thing here. This is another interesting thing. Applying the same regulation to all 6 Coosa River reservoirs would ensure that angling will be improved for all bass anglers who fish the Coosa River reservoirs, and that no local municipality will be disproportionately affected by the loss of tournament participation. The way I read that is like, listen, we are going to ban business on a Coosa River lake, but don't worry, we will equally ban business amongst all 6 lakes. So we're equally hurting financial ability for all 6 areas, okay? Believe in us. But disproportionately affected, like what they're saying is they will equally affect all of them the same amount because they are equally affecting all 6 lakes. So all 6 towns along these lakes that might have had a tournament go there, don't worry, we're not going to select just Neely Henry and then all the tournaments go to the other counties. It's like basically saying one of your kids is bad, so you punish all of them equally. That's kind of how that read to me. It's just interesting like how he worded it. Applying a regulation to only one Coosa River reservoir could result in tournament organizations favoring adjacent rivers. No shit, Sherlock. To avoid the restrictive limits. Why? But wouldn't they just leave the Coosa River? So, again, we're just going through this, and I'll give you my final thoughts on the article at the end. But okay, if let's just say I'm going to ban tournaments on the Coosa River. Okay, they're going to leave. If I ban it on one Coosa River thing, you're right, they're going to go to the other ones. So why not reword that a little bit? Hey, listen, we're really worried about the tournament pressure on our local bodies of water. So we're installing a 5-year plan where for the next 5 years, we're going to have very restrictive slot limits to help rejuvenize the fishery. And then after the 5 years, the slot limits will automatically be dissolved, so to speak, unless it gets revoted on. That way, all the anglers know that it's not permanent. It has a ticking clock where it will automatically dissolve unless it's revoted on. So there's an end to this nightmare. And we all understand where it's at. This wording here is weird, where it's like they're admitting that there's going to be an economic impact from this, and they're trying to brace you for it. They're fine with that. For better or worse, they're just bracing you for it. Recommendations. We recommend a 14 to 20 inch protective slot limit for all black bass during any tournaments utilizing live weigh-ins on all 6 Coosa River reservoirs. Wesley, Neely Henry, Logan Martin, Lay, Michael, and Jordan. Table 2 shows the predicted increase. The predicted increase in abundance of bass greater than 20 inches in each reservoir under the proposed regulation, which ranges from 20 to 43% for largemouth and from 43 to 71% for the Alabama bass. Let's go on to that slide real quick. I'll show that to you. I think it said slide 6. There it is. Oh, wait, no, it's that one. Sorry. Boom. Interesting stuff. That's slide 3. Where's slide 6? Oh, they don't even have it there. Interesting. Okay. Table 2 shows the predicted increase. Is this fucking table 2? Oh, there it is. That's a small ass table. Predicted percentage increase of the bass over 20 inches on the Coosa River Reservoirs. Managed 15. What's the time limit? What do these numbers mean? Where's the slot? Where's anything telling me what these numbers mean? Okay. This means this is worthless. This means nothing. Over what time frame? A year? 10 years? 5 minutes? Like, this doesn't make any sense at all. Like, come on, guys, you got to give me something here. Is this what range is this going to increase it? I can just say gobbledygook with percentages, but it doesn't say anything. That makes no sense. Okay. Because, I mean, hey, maybe people out there, you can let me know. They say this is the predicted stuff. It doesn't say how long. It doesn't say what the time horizon is for any of this. Nothing. And how did they capture the mortality rates compared to the other reservoirs in the region? How did they do that? What specific data or findings did they use? Like, how was this brought together? What was the significant role of tournament anglers? Like, it's just, yeah. I'll save my stuff for the end. That's really interesting there. Okay, this regulation has been discussed with and is supported by the WFF Law Enforcement Section. There would be no need for its conservation officers to distinguish between tournament and recreational anglers on the water because it could easily be enforced at the time of the weigh-in. Initially, tournament weights, again, this is interesting here. Initially, tournament weights will be significantly impacted as there are currently very few fish exceeding the upper end of the protected slot. However, each year, survival and growth of fish protected by the slot will result in increase in abundance of fish over 20 inches in length. Perhaps the greatest benefit of this regulation would be to increase the voluntary participation in catch-weigh release tournament formatting. Is this... I'm going to stop. I'm going to hold myself. This would allow tournament organizations to credit its competitors with catches of all fish within the prospective slot limit. Their immediate release following the catch and weigh would reduce the tournament mortality to near zero. I kind of get what you want. And then that was the end of the article. That's it. That's the article. We got Paul here. Paul says they can't display actual mortality rates because they don't have any. It's nearly impossible numbers to determine because there are so many variables. Absolutely. And that kind of gets to some of my points. So, I had Captain Steve Chaconis, we had a meeting on Tuesday for the Black Bass Advisory Board talking about Maryland stuff. And he mentioned it during that display of the information that they had there, that when you're talking about mortality rates, the real way you can do it is a pen study. And a pen study would be, I'm going to pick on somebody in the chat. Paul brings a 4-pounder to the scales. Me and a biologist take that fish after you weigh it and we put it in a pen, a nice aerated tank for like a day or two. And we stare at that sumbitch until we see what happens. Like, does it die? Because just because you release a fish back into the wild doesn't mean it lives, okay? So you put it in a pen for 3 or 4 days and you see if it dies, and you do that to so many fish, and from there you do a projection and a forecast. And based on that projection and forecast, you can then say, hey, we predict these are how many fish that live, these are how many fish that die. A lot of times they're not doing this study. It's anecdotal. Is it the tournament director telling you that there's dead fish? Is it that you drove to the boat ramp after the tournament to say that you're dead fish? There are so many variables there with this stuff. We got Texas has done some of those studies. Yeah, Texas is really good. I really need to get. I had the guy on that runs Lake Fork actually to talk about a study he did with forward-facing sonar. I need to get him on to talk about the catch rates, the kill rates, things like that, because there are good studies out there. And that's the thing about this that bothered me. It just wasn't a good, I don't want to say it's a good study. Maybe someone put a lot of work into it. There's a lot of holes in it. It didn't make sense. It felt weird. Like the way it kept throwing in catch weight release. And then it's like, and Boyd Duckett said we should do this. And it's like, that was weird. Like just come out and say, we are in favor of this, period. Now some people could be like, well, Tom, that's exactly what he said. That's fair enough. Fair enough. Maybe he did. To me, that was really, really, really weird. The other thing here is, this is hypothetical. There are better studies about slot limits. Why do you just randomly say it should increase this by 20 to 43%? That seems random. Based on what? Like, based on what? Like, this thing here, I don't know where you came up with these numbers for this. That doesn't make, like, again, now is it based off of this? And what's the time horizon? That's the bigger thing about all of this. When you're talking about we can increase the size of the fishery, but it's going to take us 5 years. Cool, that's fine. Then why don't you state in the article that we want to put this in for 5 years and then we're going to recheck it? That wasn't put there at all. It's all open-ended. We got Paul here. Paul says, assuming tournaments have zero mortality with CWR, which is false. Exactly. But, and then this is something I want to bring to mind here before we can segue to the other article that I have. So I did a little bit of math here. You know, I know after the bass fishing did their whole no entry fees, people don't like math. They're scared of it, but I want to do some math here. Let's say that this is a 5 fish limit and we have, comp. We'll just do comp. Okay. So you have 100 competitors at 5 fish limit. This right here is the old format from the 60s. This is catch and kill. Okay. A catch and kill format means you have 500 fish that were killed, period, in the story. You have the catch, weigh, release format. Okay. And let's just say, again, we're going to have, I did the math here with that, by the way, so you guys can see the old mathy math. You still caught 500 fish, correct? Yeah. But let's say if we say there's a 50% mortality rate, shits and giggles, that means that you have saved over 50% of the fish. You have gone down to a 50% cut in the death of fish. You see how easy that is to show off? When they are saying these mortality rates up here, let me get back up to them. There's actually probably an easier way to do this, but you know. Not so bad. No, wrong one. Here we go. There's 60%, 70% estimated approximately total batch for the water. All right. Okay. 70% right here. This is a good one. Okay. So when you're saying 70% of the mortality, if that was the case, if the mortality rate was that high, how many fish are in these lakes? If these numbers were true, if the mortality rate was that high, could you forecast out specifically how many fish are in this lake? Because if you are stating that every single tournament that you're having a mortality rate between 50% and 70%, in theory on some of these lakes, wouldn't there be no fish left? Because if you have a tournament on a Saturday and that one has a 40% mortality rate, and then you have a tournament the next day and that has a 40% mortality rate, in theory, you would have no fish left. And that's the same thing when you say like they're killing 6 billion sharks a year. Discovery Channel says that. That's bullshit numbers, because if you killed 2 million to 3 million sharks every year, eventually you're getting to an infinite number where there should be no more sharks. A lot of it is just, it's sexy to say a big number, in my opinion. So that to me is where it's interesting. And then, yeah, and they're not saying that. I can go to another number here. Let's find another number. You know what I could do? Mortality. There. There we go. So mortality, right? There it is. Boom. This is likely a conservative estimate, as research has shown that total tournament mortality can range from 50 to 80% during hot weather. Boom. Yeah, the ones that don't cash a check, yeah. I love this, Klein. They're not saying that mortality is 70%. They're saying 70% of the mortality comes from anglers that suck. I know. It's so funny to me. But this is okay. This gets into one of my points, though. So one of the points that I wrote down is they have not done a study that is based on the level of the tournament organization. Does the Bassmaster Elite Series have the same mortality rate as a Thursday nighter? Does the Weekend Warrior Tournament Series have the same mortality rate as the Toyota Series? I have no evidence to back what I'm about to say, but I think it is really bell curved, like you said, to the Weekend Warriors probably have a higher mortality rate than the Bassmaster Elites, in theory. Now, you could be skewed because if the Bassmasters are there for 4 days with 120 anglers, they're catching a bunch of fish, and that might bump up their numbers. But I feel like a professional angler is probably going to take better care because they have the brand new boat, they have the ice. Every ounce matters so much. I don't know. Like, I feel like pound for pound, a professional angler is probably taking care of them more. Now, in theory, if that is correct, and you did that study, what you should be restraining is the lower level tournament organizations, correct? It should be the Thursday nighters. But then again, it sounds like Alabama doesn't have everything documented. It sounds like what you need to do is document all of your tournament directors. That would make a big difference. But anyway, back to this point here I was about to make. This fun little thing right here. 40% of the total bass capture occurred at the event during the tournament competition. It was estimated that a total of 45% of bass weighed in during tournament suffered 45%. So 45% of all bass weighed in during tournaments suffered pre and or post-release mortality. This is likely a conservative estimate, as research has shown that total tournament mortality can range from 50 to 80% during hot weather. Let me do some research and get a guy on to talk about these studies, because that to me seems, I want people to start really defining this for me. If you're saying 50 to 80% of tournament mortality, is that each tournament or is that all tournaments? What is your sample size? Is it from the beginning of July to the end of July? Is it all year? If it's each tournament, that doesn't make sense, because that at that point, it's just a krill size. You're just killing them. Just don't even throw them back in the water. So that doesn't make sense. So is it the number of tournaments? Is it that the issue? It just seems like this thing is very scattered shock. Like, we should just assume it. I don't know. Very, very, very interesting stuff with this article for sure. And then here you go. Species of largemouth, the slope, and the intercept, but then it doesn't really show you, it shows you the max age of the fish these are the fish that were caught with the allele, so they dissect them to show them off to you, but it doesn't really say how many tournaments anywhere. I'm making sure I'm not being a fool of myself. Nope. It doesn't say anything about tournaments. It doesn't say anything about how many tournaments. I'm sure someone with money that lives on the lake got mad and bitched to the governor, kind of like the 6 mile per hour zone at Gunpowder. Paul, probably. So that is interesting. So that's the article. My initial thoughts before we move on. What does this have to do with a squirrel? That's the reason I wanted so hard, because I'm following that Peanut story. Like, I drive my wife crazy about that, about the Peanut the squirrel, because I followed that case hard, man. It's interesting when a squirrel can radicalize the nation. That was a paper you just read. Whatever side of the ball you fall on, and this thing's gonna get re-uploaded, and I'm gonna get killed in the comment section that Tom can't read. Well, I can't read out loud. Fuck you. I don't care. But anyway, I digress. That's a paper that was written that will probably sway law in Alabama, potentially. I don't think it was written really well. I think it wasn't tight. I think it was really wishy-washy. I think there's a lot of data that was missing specifically, and that could create a law in the book that might never go away. Once a law gets thrown on the book, it is hard as hell to repeal it. And again, that's how you get the SWAT team to raid your house and kill your raccoon and your squirrel. And then people will say like, well, it was the law. It's like, well, it was a really stupid law that wasn't well thought out. It wasn't articulated very well. What is the point of the law? What's the end goal here? Is there nuance to the law? And then that's insane. It didn't even cite a single source. Yeah, exactly, Paul. It just that blew my mind there with that whole thing. When I read it the first time, and then the shade he threw at anglers that sucked. That was really weird. Like all the little jabs of like, I really wish he just put his friend's name in there. It wasn't a scientific paper at all. There was too much personal interjection into the paper. Yeah, exactly. And now I know somebody in the comment section when I re-upload this will be like, well, it wasn't supposed to be. It's like, are you sure? Because it seems like it's masquerading as one, which again, yeah. I'm going to post on Facebook tomorrow a list of my questions, my big questions that I have about this article. But for now, we're going to go to the next main attraction, which is somewhere. Here it is. All right. The next big one we're going to talk about. Maryland. Now, this is a slide presentation. It is not a scientific paper or anything like that. So it won't be up to the same tutelage, but we'll go through this slideshow too for Maryland, because this is what we just came out with. We're talking about for next year. These are some different ideas and concepts to let tournament directors know about. Nothing was voted on yet, by the way. So, these were how many permit tournaments in the past 5 years. There was over 1,900 tournament permits granted in Maryland over the past 5 years. There was 678 in the Upper Bay. Now, right away, look at how kind of, even though this is not a scientific paper, this was given to us by the new head of the Black Bass Advisory Board for Maryland. This is already way better, way more concise, and it's a goddamn PowerPoint presentation. We know how many tournaments are happening in Maryland in the big places. We know that there's 678 tournaments that were documented on the Upper Bay. We know there's 459 on the Potomac River. That's tangible. I don't know how many effing tournaments were on that other place. I don't know when they were, how many, the size, none of that. I already know at least a grasp of this is a 5-year sample and these are the tournaments and where they're at. Cool. All right. Thank God. Okay. And then 46% occurred under our permits special fish care condition time frame. And that would be from June 1st to September 30th. And that could be a multitude of things. Okay. So here are some thoughts on the requirements going for the June 1st to September 30th timeframe. These are some interesting ideas that they proposed, okay? Anglers must have a functioning live well. I voted no shit to that one. Don't know why is that. A restriction on calling techniques. That's like no kidding there. No calling dead fish. And these are the rules that are already there. And transporting in water-filled containers to and from the weigh-in. A maximum of a 2-minute transportation time frame if no exposure to supplement aerated water. Anglers must use continuous live well circulation with periodic water exchange when water temperatures exceed 80 degrees. Anglers must ensure bass are recuperated prior to release using one or more approved methods. So, right now, they're talking about the requirements that are on the board right now in Maryland. Boom, these are them right there. Alrighty, let's hop to fish mortality. So this is from one single event. This was the worst single day fish kill from a tournament in 2024 that the state of Maryland recorded. This was a late June Potomac River event held out of Smallwood State Park. There were 1,375 fish weighed in. Out of that, there was over 113 dead bass collected at the weigh-in. That makes it an 8.2% mortality rate, which is insane. 60% of the fish were above 16 inches or 2 pounds, and the air temperature was 87 degrees Fahrenheit. So 82%. That seems like a lot for a single event, right? Well, let's go back to our lovely document here that we love so much. What does it say here? It says, it was estimated that a total of 45% of bass weighed in during tournaments suffered pre- and or post-release mortality. This is likely a conservative estimate, as research has shown that total tournament mortality can range from 50 to 80% during hot weather. At a high school and collegiate tournaments have increased, the number of summertime tournaments has also increased. Okay, so right away, this is not telling us where's this study from. Is this a national study where we're taking a tournament from Lake Gunnersville, a tournament from Smith Mountain Lake, a tournament from Kerr? Is this just one single body of water? Is it over a whole year? Is it one event? We don't know any of that. I look at the Maryland chart, I know right away, this is one single event, late June, Potomac River event held at Smallwood State Park. These are how many fish were caught. This is how many is killed. This is the mortality rate. Boom, 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 average air temperature. I concisely know what this is. And it says it was a bad fish kill of 8.2%. Okay, so at least I understand where Maryland's coming from with this document. Coming over to here, they're just saying it was estimated that a total of 45% of bass weighed in during tournaments. So tournaments, not a tournament. This wasn't a single event. So since they put a plural right here, I'm assuming it's multiple events that they're saying there's a 45% fish kill. And then they say that's conservative. As research has shown, I don't know which work they're citing for this, says it's 50 to 80% during hot weather, which is confusing to me. And I wanted to, when people talk about mortality rates, I'm going to be real with you for a minute. When people talk about mortality rates and, oh, this was 80, this is 30, this is 20, what does that mean? So if I say that there is a 8% fish kill, is that for one event? Is that the average of every event on a specific body of water? Is that collectivized through a bunch of different tournaments scattered across the country? Why is this important, these questions I'm asking? Because a big number that is missing here is, well, how many fish of that catchable class size, let's say 3+ pounds, live in a body of water? So example is here. Let's say the Potomac River. Well, how many bass of 3+ pounds are there? And what I did is I formulated a little calculation chart to kind of help us out. I want to take you guys through that right now. So this is a little chart I made, and we threw in some numbers here. So if I scroll down right here, let me make this a little bit bigger for you guys. Boop, boop, boop. All right, cool. So based on this lovely document that Maryland gave us, there was 1,300 fish caught for this one event. So again, these numbers aren't perfect. There are going to be some issues here, but I just want to get you guys to critically think about this stuff. So let's just say, okay, cool. There was 1,300 fish caught in this event, and there was a mortality rate of 8.2%. That gives us 113 fish caught. And then I sprinkled in like a 3% mortality rate and then a 45% just to be where they said it was conservative, because on average, tournaments, based on what they said, kill 45% of the fish. Now, let's just say there was 100 events per year held. And we'll average 100 times this number up here. This is basic math, people. And we get over 100,000 fish caught per year. Now, based on that average that they said, on average this happens, that means we have 4,000 fish killed per year, 11,000 fish killed per year, and then 61,000 fish killed per year. Now, you might be like, Tom, that is grotesque. That is an Armenian genocide. That's not good at all. Yes, but how many fish are in that body of water? So I scrolled all over to here and I made this. So let's say we're going to get guessing on the fish population. Let's just say the 3-pound plus range. We're going to say that there's over 10,000 bass in the Potomac River that are over 3 pounds. Okay, we're just going to say 10,000 bass. Well, if 4,000 were killed per year that are over that 3+ pound range, that means each year you're losing 41% of your 3+ pound bass population. 41%. That's insane. But Maryland said it's 8.2. Well, that would be over 113%. That means in 1 year, your whole population is gone. There are no more bass plus 3 pounds in the body of water. And this doesn't factor in just people keeping bass to eat, them dying of natural causes, osprey, you name it. So this is just from tournaments that it's saying if there was only 10,000 largemouth in the Potomac River that are plus 3 pounds, 1 year, done. There's not a bass left over 3 pounds, which we know is bullshit. And then let's go to what the Alabama Bass paper says, which is, well, 45% mortality is a conservative estimate. It could be way worse. Okay, let's just see that. That would be over 600%. Looney Tunes. You could be like, well, Tom, 10,000 is a small number. All right, cool. Let's go to 50,000. There's 50,000 bass over 3 pounds in the Potomac River, let's say. 8%. All right, I could believe that. 22% would be their number. We're killing 22% of the population of largemouth each year. I don't buy that, because then you calculate in regular fish dying, the ospreys, all the other conditions. That would probably add another couple of percentage points. Again, I'm not the scientist, I'm not speculating, I'm just trying to show you the math here, which means this number would probably be a little bit higher. So I'm assuming we got close to 100,000 to 250,000 bass in just the Potomac River. But that's not the point here of the 8.2%. I want to go on Alabama's number. So let's just say, like they said, 45% is the conservative estimate. Okay, if there was 100,000 bass in the Potomac, that means more than half their population gets eradicated, boom, dead, every year. There would be no bass left. Because if you think about compounding interest, if you have $100,000 in your bank account and you take away 60% each year, you might not be adding enough back each year that population would go down, you'd be done. And live well tournaments didn't just start. Live well tournaments have been around since the 70s. So math is not mathing for me, guys. All right, let's just go to 200, like 250,000. All right, well, at their estimate of 45%, that would be 24% fish kill. And this is my whole point with doing this calculation is unless I know the percent population in that body of water, 45% doesn't mean much. If it's 45% of a guessed population of 10,000 largemouth, oh my God, we got to do something right now. But if you estimate in Neely Henry or the Potomac River, there's 1 million largemouth over 3 pounds, let's say, that's 6%. That's a drop in the bucket, and that doesn't count about the spawning class and things like that. And then again, when it gets back to this article here, there are some really good scientific studies done about fish mortality in the summer. I would like them just to cite it of like, oh, it was a study done in one body of water. Okay, cool. It gets me grounded. I understand it more. Or is the study based on 6 or 7 different lakes spread throughout the country? So now we're going to say like, oh, it's 80%. Yes, but then what is the population of that lake? I really, really feel like with these numbers that they use to scare you, you need to know at least a forecasted amount of like how many largemouth are we dealing with at that size. Because I'll tell you, I'm pretty sure like a Toledo Bend, a Gunnersville, a place like that, it's going to have closer to 500,000 to 2 million largemouth in that 3+ pound range. It's not going to have 10, 50, 100,000. I could be wrong. But if it really was just 100,000 or 250,000 at a 45% fish kill clip, you're going to get up there to 24 to 12% of the population killed. And that's before you talk about people taking fish to eat, ospreys, natural causes, all that crap. So, and again, the other factor is these fish get re-released, but potentially you get caught fish that get caught multiple times. So if you're saying each tournament has a 45% mortality rate and you had 10 fish caught the first day and then a percentage die, percent gets put back, and some of those get caught again, do those fish keep leaving or they keep dying? So it just feels like a lot of these numbers are scare tactics. It really does. It's like when they say like a percent mortality on a drug, and if you take this, everything good will happen. You know, people who own dogs, live 25% longer, and just, bullshit Instagram, things like that. Ask these questions. Am I completely right? No, God, no, I'm not. But this is the questions I wish people would be asking. It's like, okay, you say in your study that between 50 and 80% during hot weather get eradicated. Okay, 80% is a lot. And even if that is not all year, you could throw 80% in here for half the events. It's still going to get these preposterous numbers like this. So again, ask these questions. It's super, super important. As fishermen, we dive into this stuff and ask intelligent questions regarding things like this. So we just broke down the whole article, what they propose. Maryland's doing a way better job. That whole article, Paul, once we actually go through it with the Black Bass Advisory Board, again, we will talk about that at length because, of course, Maryland will get its spotlight. I believe that. My closing thoughts, my closing arguments for this whole shindig. You spent $1 million on a 3-year study, and if that was the scientific paper, there's a lot of holes in it. And I would like to see like a full scientific journal with your works cited pieces. That's number one. If you wanted to go with the slot limit, specifically if you really wanted to make it just about the slot limit, you should have worded your argument a little bit better, a little bit more constructive, and you should put a time frame about how this is going to actually increase and help the fisheries. You make it very vague. You throw out percentages and stuff that don't really mean anything when there's no time to anchor it. So example is, they spent $1 million for that paper. Someone got robbed. They spent, at least, if you look at this thing at the very top of the article, it says it took them over $800,000 over 3 years. That's insane. Absolutely insane. We got Paul. Can we talk offline about the Maryland stuff? Yeah, sure, dude. Yeah, you can message me. We can talk about it. They got $1 million for that, and I'm in the wrong profession. Yeah, and that kind of gets back to my thing is, how do I word this politically? I am not against doing fish size limit restrictions. However, did you exhaust everything else? When we talk about a lake fork, which I think is the pinnacle of this when it comes to the size thing, they also have the perfect amount of forage. They have fantastic habitat with SAV and logs and everything, standing trees, perfect climate, perfect size lake, and then they also instituted a slot limit. However, there's other factors there that probably made it good. Texas has the Texas Big Fish program. They have put specific genetics into that lake. They stocked that thing in years past to make sure the gene pool in Lake Fork is good. And then you also have the slot limit. So it's not just the slot limit that potentially could have made Lake Fork good. It could have been a helping factor. So to say that we just slap this on and all of a sudden this lake will be perfect, I don't know about that. Why not do a F1 stocking program if you want better largemouth? That has been proven at many places across the United States. It has worked at Smith Mountain Lake. It has worked at the James River. It is working at Lake Anna. Texas has shown you that proper genetics will work a ton. Fixing the ecosystem there, allowing for more water willow to grow, adding subaquatic vegetation will help. Now, maybe you've already done that. Why didn't you put that in the article? That we've exhausted all these other things. We've done A, B, C, and D, and this is the last thing. This is the last bullet in our gun. Did you mention talking to the professional anglers about, hey, doing better fish care, about putting ice in your live wells, about doing those little things that Marilyn just talked about increasing the fish kill penalty? No. So you didn't say about doing a restocking program. You didn't talk about doing habitat restoration. You didn't talk about mandating a higher fish kill penalty, so to speak. You didn't talk about putting ice in the cooler. None of these other factors existed. You just went straight to slot limit. And by the way, let me tell you about Boyd Duckett and Major League Fishing and kayak fishing for that matter. And by the way, most people that kill fish, they just suck at it. They shouldn't weigh in their fish. I could have written this thing in a more efficient way that would have been a better pitch for a slot limit. I could have easily been like, okay, based on our analysis, we have already tried to do habitat restoration. We're doing genetic work to improve the genetics of the population. We're doing an F1 program. We are also launching a campaign to teach anglers about fish mortality rates, ice in the coolers. We are going to start documenting every tournament in Alabama to hold tournament directors accountable for a high mortality rate. And on top of that, for the next 2 to 3 years, just for the next 2 to 3 years, we are going to implement a limit, whatever size, fill in the blank. Now there's 2 ways you could do this. You could rotate it and say, Neely Henry is going to have this for 5 years because we want to see if it works. A case study at Neely Henry. And after the 5 years, we will sample it and we'll see if it worked. If it worked, then we'll apply that to another lake. That way, it's not that we're just nuking the whole chain. Or you could end it by saying, hey, we're going to take and we're going to put this out there for 3 years to see if it works. And that way you have an end to your date. You have an end to your study. We're going to study the effects of doing this thing for 3 years. And then we're going to take it off automatically. That way it doesn't freak the populate out. This is being smart. Like if you capture a squirrel, you don't just blow its head off the next day. You'd be like, hey, listen, this thing has 500,000 followers. Maybe we shouldn't kill it right away. Might be a bad idea. Maybe in this paper you say like, listen, this is only going to be for 2 to 3 years. Hard stop. this bill will run out in 2 to 3 years, and then we're going to study it again, and we have good data. Perfect. I just described this thing in a better way where you could sell it to the public. This was very just, and you keep it so vague. And I keep going back to that line. The best thing to do would be outlaw tournament fishing. It didn't say catch, weigh, release. It didn't say weigh, and it just said tournament fishing, because I really believe in the Overton window. In the 1970s, you looked like you were a crazy hippie for doing catch, weigh, release, because you just killed them. That's what you do. And now we're here where you look like a crazy hippie if you want to put the fish back, and you're like an old fuddy-duddy if you want to put it in the boat. If you got rid of if you got rid of putting it in the live well, when are they just going to say, well, fishing is wrong? Is that the next step? Are we going to keep going down that way? It's just a slippery slope. And, I don't like putting legislation when we could probably do other things to help the ecosystem. Sometimes it's needed. I get that. But write a better paper. For the love of God, just write a better paper. All right, let me get some of these questions answered here before I have an interview I'm going to be doing. It has dramatically decreased thanks to Miss Bard. Yeah, I agree. Look at the effects that education about fish care has affected mortality rates on the St. Lawrence, 100%. And the other thing too is not just ice. It's about getting an oxygen injector actually into boats. And, Forrest Wood really pushed to get live wells with aerators in boats back in the early 70s. Maybe that's the next thing you see. Like the call clip. Hey, I'll be a hippie. I like the no puncture call tags. I think in general, it's good. There are some guys that are really good with the old puncture call tags. They're really good with them. But in general, a non-puncturing call tag is going to hurt less fish because the idiots won't hurt them. Learning how to fizz. That's a big thing. You should educate anglers on learning how to actually fish and care about that. Or don't hold tournaments. As a tournament director, having a responsibility not to hold tournaments at that time of year potentially could be another thing as well. Again, little things like that. The billions of gizzard shed help fork a lot. Oh God, yeah. And again, it's just the reason I want to use fork is not to pick on fork, but it's not just one thing. And when I posted some stuff about this in the comment section, it was like, well, what about Lake Fork? What about this? It's not just the slot limit. Do I think the slot limit help at Lake Fork? Yes. But if you take away the slot limit tomorrow, Lake Fork doesn't suck because it still has great genetics, great forage, great cover. Gunnersville, they kept mentioning Gunnersville. Gunnersville has amazing SAV. And you know what Gunnersville doesn't have a plethora of? Alabama bass, because Alabama bass hate grass. That's why they can't thrive in Florida. That's why they haven't gotten down to those deep southern lakes. They hate it. I had the guy on from Auburn that's on the task force for the Alabama bass. They hate SAV. Gunnersville has a lot of SAV. That's why there's a thriving largemouth population. They have a lot of bluegill. They have a lot of forage in Gunnersville because of the stupid grass. There's more surface area at Gunnersville that is livable for fish and aquatic life. You kill all that shit, guess what? You'll have less. You'll have a Neely Henry. And if you have 6 stumps in that damn place, yeah, they're going to get pilchered to death. It's insane. Anyway, I don't want to get on that. I think if tournaments police their own, so to speak, and establish catch, weigh, and release, and maybe we won't have tournament bans in the first place, but at the same time, we got to think about how much. Okay, Doc Karen's policies anyway. Doc Karen's influence policy anyway, but we need to be able to defend ourselves by pointing out reasons X, Y, and Z. Yeah, and Justin B, I know you're just tuning into this. You can rewatch it. We just went through the whole freaking document and breaking it down. You can give me an argument where I agree with you on a lot of things if you state your argument well. This paper, I think, was horseshit. It sucked. It wasn't written really well. It threw a lot of shade at people, and it didn't do well to do that argument. Either the paper was an opinion piece or a summary opinion. Fish care is the biggest issue. I agree 100%. It must have been an opinion piece. And maybe I'm missing something. Maybe the Alabama would like to reach out to me. You can send me the real one, but this is the one that major news articles are using. And this is where I got it from, was Wired to Fish. And it's just interesting. There's no works cited. Again, they said 50 to 80%, 45 to 80% mortality rates. Maryland said they had 15%. So what does that mean? What do you mean 80%? Through the year? Through a month? Through one tournament? I need to know more of that information. If you're saying each tournament has 80% mortality rate, there would be no bass left in the lake. It's like, again, when people say like every year we lose 1 billion sharks. Well, if my math is right, that means in like 10 to 20 years, it's like 1 trillion, right? So are we saying we had 1 trillion sharks to begin with? Or is that media sensation like you got to wear a mask or you're going to kill your neighbor because fear sells? So you have to say 80%. You will skew the data because if you make the numbers shocking, you can get people to do what you want. We've done this before. Okay, this happened 4 years ago when people lied to us about stats and shit. So like, just read this shit and think about it. Is it really 45% each tournament? Is it really 45%? Is it 45% for the whole country? Is it 45% for 200 tournaments? What's the mathematical breakdown? Like, pull up an Excel spreadsheet and work through this yourself. And you'll figure out that 20 to 30% isn't bad, actually, when you're dealing with the size of the data that they're working with. But again, you can also take that data and you can adjust it to make sure it suits your needs. So I'm very skeptical about data until I see how you got your data. Because if you forecast anything, the farther out you forecast statistically, there's more of an error rate and it increases. So again, like, it's so easy to lie about data so you can get what you want with your opinion, which we saw during COVID. So just read through the data and ask those questions. And if the work isn't cited, that's a big like tell. That's why this is an opinion piece. That's why I was like captured of it. And they basically told you had to go with Boyd Duckett. Let me get through all these comments here. And then this thing will be re-uploaded again, I promise. Doc Karen's influence policy way more than we can defend ourselves. No, 100%. And Paul, what you got to do is you have to go to local meetings. You have to go to little advisory board stuff. When those happen, they matter. If you live at Lake Okeechobee and there's an advisory board meeting, you go there. If there's something in Alabama with Lake Guntersville, go to that. You got to talk. You got to bring this stuff to fruition. Let me get up. I had another comment here. Peanut is a national hero. Justin B., you're goddamn right, he's a national hero. And I'll leave you with that. There was a comment in my comment section a while ago. And, I had Instagram going this whole time. I don't even know if there was a damn comment about Instagram. Hold on right there. I like this. We haven't done one of these fireside chats in a while. This was very nice. Let's see. I'm going to go to my Instagram comments real quickie here. Let's see. J0 in Hamilton. I don't see how the rate can be anywhere near 50%. That seems insane. I agree. And again, all they have to do is say this is 50% overall. This is, I don't know. I don't even know how they could make that work for me for 50%. But you could explain the data a little bit better and it actually make sense. We got Rick with Jack in the comment, and he says, if it is a 40% mortality rate per tournament, how does that math work? I don't know. I don't think it's a 40% mortality rate per tournament because that's insane. And if it was, how does that, that wouldn't make sense, right? If you have a tournament, if you have 3 tournaments a week at 40%, you wouldn't have a population of fish left after a year, but we do. And genetically, if you believe in survival of the fittest, they said that the fast-growing fish die at a higher clip than the slow-growing fish because the fast-growing fish get bigger and they get in the live well to get driven back, so they die. So it stunts the growth. Can I counter that? If a fish is able to get in the live well, live all day with the stress, get dumped back in the water, and survive, it has a stronger genetic code and it breeds. The fish that was softer, not to use scientific terms, but died right away, it doesn't get to breed. So what is left is a very hardy fish that could actually withstand more live well transportation. We could play this game both ways, I guess. And then last thing here, and then I'm going to call it for the night. Been there, done that. Advisory board voted to change the law. Secretary of the DNR overrode the decision. Turns out she was friends with the person who pushed to have the law put in. That sounds about right. And that's where you need money, and that's where we need our own group. We need a group that actually speak for us fishermen and actually try to listen to what we have to say. But in the end, a lot of places, they just don't care about us. They don't. We are such a small footprint in the whole lake ecosystem, unless it talks about chemical spills and things like that. Then they get pissy. Just ask what happened on the Shenandoah. Yeah, Paul, if you want to reach out to me, you can message me on Facebook or reach out to me on Instagram. We can talk a little bit more about anything you want. I think that's everything I got. Guys, this is going to be re-uploaded on Monday morning. This will be the main episode where we're going to go through, where I go through all this. I'm sorry I didn't talk real good with it. I don't like reading out loud. I suck at that. But I'll also post my big questions I had from the article on Facebook and the YouTube community section. Just my big highlights from it. Example is like, what's your time frame? That didn't make any sense at all. Why didn't you list other things like ICE, education, different, like little things like that? It was very skewed, and you didn't works cite it, which was weird. Anyway, that's all I have for tonight, guys. Go watch the Redskins. They are the Redskins. They're not the team from Washington. Hail to the Redskins, baby. And I will see you next time on Fishing the DMV. Bye. You're listening to Fishing the DMV with your host, Thomas Ahrens. Fishing the DMV is brought to you by Jake's Bait and Tackle, located in Winchester, Virginia.
If that doesn't get you jacked up, I don't know what will.